Let's try a little thought experiment. Imagine it's November, 1942. You're out in the blistering heat of the North African desert. You're a master mechanic for the German Africa Corps, and you have been taught your entire life that German engineering is, well, the best. It's just a fact. Your machines are precise, they're sophisticated, they are perfect. But then, your commanding officer points to this small, beat-up enemy vehicle and he tells you, see if you can get that thing running. Now, you don't know it yet, but what you're about to discover under that hood isn't just going to change your mind. It's going to reveal the blueprint for a kind of war your nation was totally unprepared to fight. And this quote right here from a German supply officer on the ground, it sums up everything we're about to talk about. See, this isn't really a story about steel and engines. It's a story of two clashing philosophies of war, hidden in plain sight inside a simple little machine. One side was chasing perfection, the other was chasing mass production. And in the end, only one of those was going to win. So our German mechanic and his team, they get to work on this strange little vehicle. The plaque on the dash says Willys MB, but the Americans, they just called it a Jeep. And when they finally lifted that hood, they didn't find some marvel of complex engineering. No, they found something way more revolutionary, a direct assault on everything they thought they knew about building machines.
What those German mechanics saw under the hood was almost, well, insultingly simple. The wires were color-coded, parts were clearly labeled, everything was easy to get to, held on with standardized bolts. For a guy used to the beautiful complexity of German machines, this was just unheard of. This engine, the Go Devil, it wasn't designed to be the absolute best. It was designed so that a tired, cold, 19-year-old kid could fix it with a few basic tools in the middle of a firefight. It was designed for the real world.
And right there, that's the fundamental difference. German engineering, it demanded highly skilled artisans, masters of their craft. America, on the other hand, built a vehicle for its citizen army, farm boys and factory workers who needed to get up to speed fast. They weren't designing for the ideal mechanic in some pristine workshop. They were designing for the actual soldier stuck in the chaos of a battlefield. And that philosophy, it changed everything. Now, to really understand the shock they felt, we have to meet the Jeep's rival, the Volkswagen Kübelwagen. It was designed by the legendary Ferdinand Porsche, and it was a really good machine. But when you put it side by side with the Jeep, you're not just comparing two vehicles, you're comparing two totally different ways of thinking about war. Just think about the terrain for a second. Sand, mud, rocky mountains. The Kübelwagen was only rear-wheel drive, a fatal flaw, it turns out. But the Jeep? It had a tough-as-nails four-wheel drive system that you engaged with a single, simple lever. That's it. So while the Kübelwagen was getting stuck in the mud of the Eastern Front, the Jeep just kept on going. It was a brutally practical advantage. And the differences didn't stop there. The Jeep used simple leaf springs for its suspension. Was it crude? Yeah, for sure. But was it easy to fix with a hammer on the side of a road? Absolutely. The Kübelwagen had a sophisticated torsion bar system that needed a specialist. The Jeep's frame was heavy, it was overbuilt, something a German engineer would call inefficient. But you know what a soldier on the front line would call it? Indestructible. It was built to survive the abuse of the real world, not the perfection of a blueprint.
So this leads to a really unsettling question, one that must have just haunted those German engineers. What if the simplicity, the crude construction, that extra weight, what if those weren't flaws at all? What if they were deliberate features? What if the Americans had figured out a fundamental truth of industrial warfare that they had totally missed? That reliability on the battlefield always beats perfection in the factory? This wasn't just a vehicle anymore, it was a wake-up call.
But that whole design philosophy, that was only half the equation. The other half was a matter of simple, brutal arithmetic. And this is where the story of a small vehicle becomes the story of how an entire war was won.
So, over the entire course of the war, Germany's incredibly precise industrial machine produced just over 50,000 Kübelwagens. For a specialized vehicle, that's an impressive number, but it was absolutely no match for what was happening across the ocean.
Over 640,000. No, that's not a mistake. That's more than 12 Jeeps for every single Kübelwagen. This wasn't a production gap, it was a chasm. At that moment, the perfection of German engineering must have seemed completely irrelevant. I mean, what good is your perfect machine if the enemy has a dozen that are good enough? And the Jeep? The Jeep was just the tip of the iceberg. America had turned its entire civilian economy into a weapon. They were churning out a B-24 bomber every 63 minutes. Giant Liberty ships were being built in weeks, not months. By the end of 1942, just America's military vehicle production alone was more than Germany, Italy, and Japan combined. It was an industrial tsunami.
and the little Jeep was riding the crest of that wave. So in May of 1943, the Afrika Korps surrendered. For 250,000 German soldiers, the fighting was over. But as they were shipped off to PO camps in America, their education was really just beginning. They were about to see firsthand the industrial engine that had completely crushed them. I love this quote. Can you just imagine being a captured German mechanic, watching American teenagers repair an entire fleet of vehicles with this incredible speed and ease? And then some motor pool sergeant just explains the whole philosophy. It's not about genius. It's about simplicity. It's about empowering the least skilled person to solve a problem right then and there.
And behind all this simplicity was a secret weapon, something called component commonality. See, the German industry, with its countless unique parts for every vehicle, just couldn't compete. The Americans understood you didn't need 1,000 different kinds of spare parts. You just needed a few hundred, produced by the millions. A bolt from a Jeep fit a truck. Any mechanic could service pretty much any vehicle. And this created a logistical ecosystem that was, well, simply unstoppable.
The brutal reality is laid bare right here. The German war machine was a logistical nightmare. They were relying on dozens of different truck types, all with unique parts. And get this, they still used horses for 80% of their transport. The American army, by contrast, was fully motorized, completely standardized, and streamlined. This wasn't just a battle of soldiers, it was a battle of systems. And the American system was just overwhelmingly superior.
But you know, the story doesn't end in 1945. In fact, this is where the most ironic twist of all begins. The very philosophy that helped defeat Germany, well, it would become the key to its rebirth. The vanquished were about to apply the lessons they learned from their victors.
Those German POWs who returned home, they didn't just bring back memories. They brought back a blueprint. They had seen American mass production up close. So as Germany began to rebuild, with a lot of help from the Marshall Plan, its engineers didn't just go back to the old ways. They started blending their own precision with the American philosophy of mass production they now understood so well.
And the symbol of this whole new era was the Volkswagen Beetle. Just think about it for a second. You've got the precision and quality of German engineering, but it's combined with American simplicity, reliability, and mass production. The very same company that built the complex Kuba wagon was now building a people's car that pretty much embodied the lessons of its old rival, the Jeep. And this fusion, it fueled Germany's economic miracle and turned companies like VW into global giants. You know, General George C. Marshall, the architect of the Allied victory, he said it plainly. America's greatest contribution to the war wasn't the bombers or the tanks. It was the humble Jeep. But why? Because the Jeep wasn't just a vehicle. It was the physical embodiment of the philosophy that won the war. It was the blueprint in the desert.
The legacy of that little Jeep is all around us, in pretty much every product that's designed to be simple, reliable, and easy to fix. That battle between perfection and production, it didn't end in 1945. It's a choice that gets made every single day. But the lesson from the desert was crystal clear. Good enough at a massive scale can and will defeat perfection in small numbers. This idea didn't just win a war and rebuild a nation, it literally shaped the modern world. And the question that leaves us with is, in a world facing brand new challenges, which philosophy do we need today? The relentless pursuit of perfection or the power of what is good, reliable, and available to everyone?